The lawyer's office smelled like lemon polish and old paper, a respectable scent for bad news. I sat on the edge of a leather chair that had been worn smooth by other people's sorrows, clutching a tissue I didn't need yet but would. Across the mahogany table, my daughter in law Claire folded her hands like a student waiting for results she refused to dread. She wore a navy dress simple and stern, and the thin gold band my son had put on her finger 3 years ago. My son, Michael. If I said his name out loud in that room, the air would have cracked. So I didn't. I just stared at the fan turning politely overhead, slicing up the silence into manageable pieces. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Garvey said, the lawyer, white hair, striped tie, the nameplate reading Walter E. Burns, ESQ, as if I had been given a choice. His voice had the mild kindness of a man who's learned the exact temperature of sympathy and never lets it boil. There are a few items in Michael's will we need to go over. Claire has already reviewed them, but I wanted you both here for clarity. Clarity. Such a clean word for the mess grief brings. I felt Claire's eyes graze my face and then retreat. We were careful with each other, like people carrying the same delicate bowl down different staircases. Michael's accident had made us fragile in opposite directions. She hardened to survive. I softened to keep breathing. We met in the middle and pretended it was enough. Mr. Burns cleared his throat. Per Michael's instructions, the mutual funds will be divided per percentages already filed. No surprises there. His thumb rubbed a smudge on the document as if he could erase and reprint the past. There is, however, a special clause regarding the family home. My home. I sat up straighter. What clause? The house at 124 Willow, he said, and the address alone made my throat go tight. Michael has named joint beneficiaries. Joint, I managed. He nodded. Ownership conveys to you Mrs. Garvey and to Claire 50-50. The fan made one more quiet circle and stopped, or maybe it just felt that way. 50-50, I repeated the way you repeat a diagnosis to make sure you heard the worst part correctly. Claire didn't flinch. Her face did the small, brave thing it's learned to do when she's sure there's a test. He told me he wanted that, she said softly. He said the house made him and the house held us, and he wanted it to hold us both. Us both. Not together, not apart, suspended like laundry you're not sure is dry. There's also a condition, Mr. Burns added, and suddenly the room had too many corners, an occupancy condition. My fingers tightened on the tissue. Meaning, he read from the page. In the event of my death, the property shall remain unlisted for sale for a period of 18 months. During that time, either beneficiary may reside in the home, provided the other beneficiary is given reasonable access and accommodation. Claire's gaze flickered quickly toward me and back. I kept my eyes on the lawyer because I wasn't ready to see whatever lived in hers, so I said, balancing on the line between fury and formality, "We're roommates." Temporarily, Mr. Burns said gently. He believed time would help you decide together. Decide what? Whether the past was heavier than the future, whether forgiveness could be furnished like a room. Feeding my anger felt like lighting a match inside my chest. I set the match down. I had promised Michael at the hospice, where he'd shaken his head at the tubes and apologized for existing, that I would not make everything harder after he left. I had promised I would try to love the people he loved, even if loving them made me feel replaced by my own permission. Mr. Burns slid a folder toward me. These are copies for your records. There's one more note, personal, not legal. He lifted a sealed envelope. My name, Margaret Garvey, was written in Michael's sloppy, earnest hand, the letters crowding one another like kids in a school photo. I asked him. Mr. Burns said if he wanted the envelope delivered separately. He said no, with the clause. She'll need to read them together. Claire reached into her purse and produced her own envelope already opened. My jealousy was small, quick and shameful. She laid it on the table like evidence that she too had been measured and found wanting by a dead man's love. Take your time, the lawyer finished, and excused himself in that professional way, leaving us with our ghosts. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The brown of the table was the brown of pews, of coffins, of the good shoes you save for weddings and funerals. The envelope trembled in my hands. No, my hands trembled around the envelope and I slid it open with my thumbnail. Mom, it began. If you're reading this, you've already forgiven me for thinking I could make peace happen with a paragraph. I know I can't. But I also know houses are made of choices. I don't want ours to turn into a museum or a battlefield. I breathed. Keep reading. Claire will come off colder than she is. You will come off warmer than you can live with. She needs time to trust a room. You need time to trust in silence. Please give each other both. I swallowed my pride. I swallowed my grief. The words kept going, and somehow they made the room bigger. About the clause, the house is more than drywall. It's you teaching me to patch a hole without making a bigger one. It's Claire learning that home can be a verb. I want you both to have it, not to hold on to me, but to learn how to hold what I loved without breaking it. When I looked up, Claire was watching me with that careful steadiness that used to feel like defiance and now only looked like fear without a safe place to sit. What did he say? She asked. That he believes in us more than we do, I said, and my laugh was a sound I didn't recognize, soft and sore. She allowed herself a breath. Mine said almost the same, but with more apologies for being sentimental. A tiny smile. He asked me to be kind about the kitchen rules. Did he? My mouth tugged despite myself. He knows where the forks go. He said you'd say that. Across the table, two women who wouldn't have chosen each other in a lifetime were being asked to choose each other in death. It's the kind of assignment you give students you love because you know it will make them better and you wish you didn't have to give it. I tucked the letter into my purse. When do you plan to move in? I'm already half there, she said, and this time her glance toward me was unflinching honest. I brought a suitcase this morning, if that's still allowed, allowed, a word that tastes like a permission slip and a dare. It's what he wanted, I said. And I had to pause, redirect the river. I won't be the reason we fail his last good idea. We shook hands, ridiculous and necessary, a contract without ink. Outside, the April sky threatened rain and changed its mind. On the sidewalk, a man in a blue jacket laughed into his phone, and for a second I envied the cruelty of ordinary days. On the drive home, I rehearsed small mercies. Don't correct her. Don't inventory what's missing. Don't stand in doorways like you own air. When I pulled into the driveway at 124 Willow, the house looked as it always had, broad-shouldered, sensible, the kind of place you forgive for its creaks because it never lets you down. The maple out front was leafing late. Michael had once called it dramatic. Everything in this family waits until the last minute, he'd teased. At the curb, Claire's hatchback idled. She was unloading a box labeled books with handwriting neater than my son's. I parked and climbed out. The gravel made the sound it always makes small surrendering stones. I can get that, I said. I've got it, she answered, then reconsidered, shifting the box so I could take the other side. We carried it together up the walk, half the weight, each the way I wish grief came. Inside the house smelled like lemon oil and the last roast I'd cooked for him without knowing it was the last. I set the box by the sofa. She hesitated in the foyer, the way people do who remember taking their shoes off the first time. You don't need to hover, she said finally. I know where most things live. I wasn't hovering. I lied. She tilted her head, a small truce. I'm going to put the clothes in the guest room. You can take the upstairs bedroom, I said. It has better light. She blinked. That was his room. It's a room, I said, and the sentence was heavier than it looked. And your family. She bit her lip, nodded, and carried her suitcase up the stairs I had vacuumed that morning too hard, as if cleanliness could force relief. I leaned against the doorway and watched dust float in the sunlight like forgiven mistakes. From the landing came the sound of a drawer opening, closing, opening, someone learning a new alphabet. I walked to the kitchen, opened the junk drawer, and took a pen. I wrote on an index card the most unreasonable thing I could think of and stuck it to the fridge. Welcome home. Minutes later, I tore it down and threw it away. Too much, too soon, too honest. When she came back down, I was at the sink rinsing a plate that didn't need rinsing. She cleared her throat. I can cook tonight, she said. It's the least I can do. The least you can do is let me, I said gentler than it sounds here. You'll cook tomorrow. She considered, then nodded. Deal. We stood for a heartbeat in the ale colored kitchen light, two women who had never been good at small talk and were now required to major in it. The house waited patient. Michael's letter sat in my purse like a compass. I put on an apron. She rolled up her sleeves. This is temporary, I told the pot on the stove, and something inside me replied, so is everything. Cook anyway. And I did. I didn't write them down, but the house knew my rules. Don't leave a pan to dry without a towel under it. Don't put tomatoes in the refrigerator unless you hate tomatoes. Don't stack the good plates under the heavy ones or you'll chip the edges and then pretend you didn't. Don't this one is older than I am talk about the dead as if they can't hear you. Claire didn't ask for a list. She moved through the kitchen like someone who believes recipes are maps and ingredients follow orders. She lined up salt and pepper as if seasoning were a philosophy. When she chopped her knife, made crisp, logical sounds. I've always believed you can tell a person's life by the way they cut an onion. Mine is a careful curve, hers a precise grid. Soup okay? I asked, reaching for the stock pot I inherited from my mother and my mother from hers. It's the color of storms and conduct's comfort like a calling. Perfect, she said. I'll make salad. We moved around each other with the grace of wary dancers who learned the steps in different schools. Every so often, our elbows considered colliding and thought better of it. I tried not to comment when she washed the lettuce twice and shook it like a penitent, and she tried not to watch me add a pinch of sugar to the tomatoes like a sinner. Grief makes people sensitive about the small things because the big thing cannot be touched. Halfway through chopping carrots, I felt her pause. I didn't look up. I let the silence stretch until it told me what it wanted to say. I didn't know he left you a letter, she said finally softly as if speaking to a skittish animal. I mean, I assumed. It makes sense. He left you one too, I said. We're not special. We're equal. Her mouth tilted with something between gratitude and offense. That's not what I meant, but thank you. You already read yours, I added carefully. She nodded. 2 months ago. The knife in my hand found the cutting board a little too hard. 2 months he'd been dead there. He gave it to me before the last hospital stay, she said. Her eyes were on the onion now, not the past. Said I wasn't allowed to open it unless something felt final. And it did. She hesitated. Yes. I watched a drop of moisture gather at the tip of the faucet grow full fall. He gave mine to the lawyer. I kept my voice even. Said I'd need it with the claws. He was right, she said, a shadow of a smile. He usually was. Stop saying that, I snapped, and we both froze. I didn't mean, I know, I said, closing my eyes for a second long enough to put shame where it belonged. It's just, it's hard to be taught something by someone who's not here to explain it, she finished, and when I opened my eyes, I found forgiveness already in hers. We worked quietly for a time. I salted the broth and tasted a memory I hadn't made yet. She sprinkled dill as if trusting small leaves to do what they've done for centuries. Do you want to hear something absurd? She asked. Always. He wrote a line about the dishwasher, she said, and her laugh was so surprised by itself that I laughed too. He said, Tell Mom I know she hates how I load it, but gravity works the same for bowls either way. He did not. He did. I shook my head, smiling, and felt the edge of the smile cut me the way a favorite song does. He used to rest plates against the sprayer arm and then wonder why nothing got clean. He said you'd say that. You're making that up now. I'm not. She raised her hand as if swearing an oath, and mine said, Tell her you like her roast even if you don't. It makes the house warmer. We were both grinning like thieves. The house was listening, and I think it liked what it heard. At dinner, we sat in our usual places, me with my back to the window, her facing it. Michael used to sit between us and narrate the sunset like it was a sport. Now the sky did its own commentary and the soup did the rest. This tastes like being forgiven, Claire said after a few spoonfuls, and I decided to take that as a compliment. Yours tastes like a plan. I said of the salad, and she laughed. Halfway through, she set her spoon down, fingers tracing the rim of the bowl. Can I ask you something without making everything worse? You can ask, I said. I'll decide about the other part. Okay, she inhaled. Do you think he intended for us to become family or simply to stop being enemies? The question sat on the table for a moment, steam rising from it. I had answers as easy as sugar, but I've learned to leave them in the bowl for a while. He intended, I said slowly, for us to inherit his favorite problem. She blinked. Which was loving more than one person at the same time, I said, and let it live there unpolished. He loved us both. He couldn't make us love each other, but he could refuse to let us use him as an excuse not to try. Claire nodded. A long exhale unwound around the word try. Then I'll keep trying. So will I. We cleared it together. When she reached for the dish towel, I didn't correct her. When I loaded the dishwasher, she let me. That's how peace begins, with restraint no one thanks you for. After the kitchen was back to rights, I found myself hovering in the doorway of what used to be his room and was now simply upstairs. Claire had propped the door open and the lamp spilled a trapezoid of light on the hall carpet. Inside, a small stack of books already made a promise on the nightstand. A sweater, hers, not his, hung from the chair back like a flag for a country we were inventing. She was kneeling by a box sorting. I cleared my throat. Do you, I started, then started again. Do you need anything? Extra blankets. He used to keep the window cracked. It lets in a draft. I like the draft, she said without turning. Makes me feel less inside. Claire, I said, and her name softened my mouth the way honey does tea. If at any point this house becomes too much, you tell me. I will not be angry. I will not hold it against you. I will not say, but the clause. She sat back on her heels and looked at me with that careful steadiness that no longer felt like defiance. It's already too much. She said, truth is like clean water, and also exactly enough. In the hall, the floor creaked. The old maple tapped a polite finger against the glass. Somewhere in the pipes, a noise did its best impression of a boy's hum. I have never been a woman prone to the mystical. Homes are made of studs and nails and arguments and apologies. But something in the house shifted then, not the furniture, not the rules, a settling, a sigh, a willingness. Good night, I said. Good night, she replied somewhere between prayer and punctuation. Back in my room, I took Michael's letter out and read it again in the lamplight, as if the words might change while I was sleeping. They didn't, of course, but I did. He had believed in a house big enough for two women to learn a third language. He had believed that love could be divided without being diminished like bread. I turned off the lamp. The dark gathered without malice. In the doorway of my mind, my son stood exactly where he always stands now, at the edge of things, smiling as if to say, "Don't forget to laugh at something small tomorrow, Mom." "I won't," I whispered, and in the quiet I thought I heard the house agree. Grief has a sound, but it also has a shape. In my house, it looked like the living room. Every cushion, every frame, every slant of light was exactly how Michael had left it. I told myself that keeping it that way made it sacred, not frozen, just safe, like pressing flowers in a book so they couldn't crumble any further. But Claire didn't see it like that. It started small. One morning I came down to find the lamp moved 3 inches to the left, not much, just enough to catch my eye. She was on the couch laptop, open, a mug balanced on her knee. I moved it, she said, before I could speak. The glare was hitting my screen. Oh, I forced a smile. Of course, it was reasonable, logical, a practical decision, but practicality has no place in grief. I moved it back after she went upstairs. The next day, a blanket disappeared from the armchair. I found it later in the guest room. It felt drafty, she said when I asked. Then the books. Michael's books, the ones he'd stacked in uneven towers beside the fireplace, were suddenly standing upright on the shelf, alphabetized. That was the one that broke me. I stood in the doorway, my heart stuttering like a bad clock. "What are you doing?" She turned, startled. They were collecting dust. You thought what? My voice rose sharper than I meant. That they needed fixing. Her brows furrowed. No. I thought maybe it would feel less like a shrine. I laughed. Then, not kindly. A shrine? She hesitated. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I said quietly. You meant it exactly like that. We stood there, two women with one ghost between us, and I realized she didn't understand. She couldn't. To her, the room was a reminder. To me, it was all that remained. I'll put them back, she said softly. Don't bother, I murmured, turning away. That night after she went to bed, I put them back. Not in the exact same order, I couldn't remember it anymore, and that somehow hurt worse. The next morning, the tension sat at the breakfast table like a third guest. She poured coffee, I buttered toast. The silence hummed, not angry yet, but awake. Finally, she said I wasn't trying to erase him. I know I said, though, my tone betrayed me. She sighed. You don't, though. You think moving things means forgetting. It does sometimes, I whispered. She shook her head. No, it means living. The words landed like a challenge. I wanted to tell her that she was young, that she hadn't lived long enough to see how the world can shift under your feet until even breathing feels like betrayal. But she looked so tired, older than her years, and I swallowed it. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't mean to overstep. I wanted to forgive her. I did. But forgiveness, I was learning, is slower than love. That afternoon she went out grocery run, she said, and I wandered the house like a ghost. My hand trailed along the banister Michael once polished before his first date with her. My fingers paused on the scuff marks by the hallway where his bike helmet used to hang crooked. I stopped at the door of his old study. It was ajar. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The desk was still as he'd left it, papers half sorted, a pen uncapped, a mug with dried rings at the bottom. On the windowsill sat a photo of him and Claire taken on their honeymoon. He was laughing. She was looking at him, not the camera. It was the kind of picture that reminds you love doesn't need to be posed. I picked it up, tracing the frame. For the first time, I saw what he saw, not her independence, not her distance, but the way she held space for him. Maybe he'd built his happiness differently than I would have, but he built it all the same. And now it was just us, the two women left behind, to decide what to do with the foundation. I put the photo back carefully and whispered, We're trying Michael. From the hallway came the faint creak of floorboards. I turned, half expecting him, but it was only the house stretching in the quiet. The discovery came 2 days later when the rain drove us both indoors. I was upstairs sorting through the linen closet, a task I performed every few weeks, though nothing ever changed. Habit is its own form of prayer. Margaret Claire's voice floated up from the study. Can you come here for a second? Something in her tone made me pause. Not an alarm exactly, something closer to awe. When I reached the doorway, she was kneeling beside the bottom drawer holding a roll of paper. I found this, she said, behind the files. She unrolled it across the desk. It was a blueprint, faded but detailed. My son's handwriting covered the margins. What is it? I asked, though I already knew. The house, she whispered. He was going to remodel. I stared at it, the rooms labeled neatly, arrows pointing to notes: expand kitchen window, open wall here. Beside the living room, a scribbled line: build reading nook for mom. My breath caught. He never told me, I said softly. Me neither. We leaned closer. At the bottom corner in small print, he'd written a title, Home 2.0. A laugh escaped me, half tear, half wonder. Of course he named it. Claire smiled faintly. Look, he even drew a garden extension. He wanted to plant lavender. He hated lavender, I murmured. Not for him, she said quietly. For you. The words undid something in me. For so long I'd thought of this house as mine, my walls, my rules, my memories. But here on paper was proof that Michael had seen it as something growing, not a monument but a promise. Claire's eyes met mine. Maybe we could finish it. My instinct was to say no, to protect, to preserve. But looking down at his messy handwriting, those hopeful arrows, I realized that maybe the truest way to honor him was to finish what he started. We don't have to change everything, she said gently, just what he planned. He planned too much, I said, voice trembling. He always did. She smiled. Then let's start small. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed in the study, tracing the lines of the blueprint under lamplight. The paper was soft worn from being handled. Maybe he'd unfolded it often, dreaming aloud to no one. My eyes fell on the reading nook, a small rectangle tucked beside the window. For Mom. Tears blurred the ink. He'd seen me, really seen me, in ways I never gave him credit for. Maybe he'd always known I was clinging too tightly. Maybe this was his way of loosening my grip, not by taking, but by building. I folded the paper gently and set it back in the drawer, but not too deep this time, somewhere it could breathe. The next morning, Claire found me at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee steaming beside the blueprint. I was thinking, I said before she could speak, we could start with the window. Just like he wanted. Her smile was quiet but radiant. I'd like that. And in that moment, for the first time since Michael's passing, I felt something shift inside me, not away from grief, but through it. Because sometimes the only way to keep love alive is to let it change shape. And maybe, just maybe, that was what my son had meant all along. You can tell a lot about people by how they handle a hammer. Some swing with confidence. Others hesitate, waiting for the wall to give permission. Claire was the latter. The morning we started, she stood beside me in the kitchen, blueprint spread across the counter nails in a tidy line. She wore Michael's old denim shirt rolled at the sleeves, her hair tied back with a pencil she'd forgotten was there. So she said, studying the paper, "We start here," I nodded, tapping the margin. He wanted this wall open between the kitchen and dining room, said it would bring in more light. She smiled faintly. That sounds like him. It does, I agreed. The sledgehammer leaned against the wall, heavier than it looked. I hadn't held one in years. My husband used to joke that I swung tools like I was trying to teach them manners. Claire picked it up, testing the weight. I've never done this before, then you'll learn, I said. We both will. She hesitated, then lifted it high and brought it down with a thud. Plaster dust exploded like a sigh. We stared at the small crater in the wall, surprised, reverent. Well, she said softly, that's one way to start. I laughed, truly laughed, and something inside me cracked wider than the drywall. By noon, we were covered in dust and accomplishment. The hole was rough, uneven, imperfect. It was beautiful. We stood back, panting. The sunlight from the dining room now spilled into the kitchen, catching the edges of floating dust. It's brighter already, she said. It is. She brushed plaster from her hair, smiling. He would have loved this. I nodded, but the words lodged, because even now part of me wanted to say, he wouldn't have done it like this. He'd have measured twice, cut once. Grief makes you a critic when you should be a student. When she went to make sandwiches, I lingered by the wall. My fingers traced the jagged edge. Beneath the surface, I saw the wooden beams, strong, silent, waiting. Sometimes love is like that. You build the frame and hope the walls can stand without you. Over lunch, Claire said I'd been thinking about finishing the reading nook next. The mention startled me. The one by the window. Yeah, we could build a small seat, maybe shelves underneath. I looked down at the blueprint, the ink smudged from our fingers. The words, "For Mom," stared back like a benediction. That was meant for me, I said quietly. I know. There was no accusation, only truth. I think he wanted you to have a place, she added, not just a house. My throat tightened. You make it sound so simple. It isn't, she said softly. But it's possible. That evening, after she went upstairs, I sat in the kitchen staring at the new opening between rooms. The air flowed differently now, freer, less confined. I thought about all the years I'd spent closing doors behind me. Maybe I wasn't afraid of change. Maybe I was afraid of proof that life could go on without asking my permission. The blueprint still lay open on the counter. I ran my finger along the line labeled Reading Nook, then folded it carefully, placing it on the table like a promise. Outside, the wind whispered through the maples, scattering last year's leaves. Inside, the house seemed to hum not mournfully, but like something being made new. It was Claire who found the box. They always do, the younger ones, with their tidy curiosity. She was in the attic looking for sandpaper when I heard her call down Margaret. You need to see this. I climbed the stairs, each creak echoing through my knees. The air smelled like cedar and dust, the kind of scent that keeps secrets. She stood near the far wall holding a wooden box, plain unmarked, about the size of a loaf of bread. It was behind the insulation, she said. I almost missed it. I took it carefully. The lid lifted with a soft groan. Inside were letters, a dozen or more, tied with a ribbon the color of old sky. On top, in Michael's handwriting, "If I'm gone." My breath left me. Claire covered her mouth. Should we? Yes, I said, though my voice trembled. We should. We carried it downstairs, setting it on the table beside the blueprint. The afternoon light slanted across the wood. Do you want to? She began. I nodded and untied the ribbon. The first envelope had my name, the second hers, the rest blank. I opened mine with shaking hands. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to finish what I started. I'm sorry for that, but you need to know this house isn't about memories. It's about roots. You always wanted me to stay close. I did. Even when I left, you were the reason I built this. You made me believe love can hold even when it hurts. Tears blurred the ink. Claire doesn't see things the way we do. She sees what can be. You see what was. You're both right. If you ever work together, the house will be better than anything I could have built. I pressed the letter to my chest. He knew, I whispered. Claire's eyes glistened. What does it say? That we were both stubborn. I smiled through tears. And that he loved us anyway. She opened hers in silence, reading quickly, then again slowly. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. He wrote about his father. Said he wanted to fix what they couldn't, that this house was supposed to be proof. I looked at her, truly looked, proof of what that family can be rebuilt, she said. The words cracked me open. All these years I'd held on to the house as a relic of what I'd lost, but maybe Michael had built it as a map to something I'd forgotten beginnings. We read through the rest together. Some letters were notes, rough drafts of thoughts he never mailed. One was addressed to future us. It simply said, "If you're fighting, stop. You'll need each other." We both laughed through tears. That sounds like him, she said. It does. Later that evening, as the light faded, I went to the window. The maple's branches framed the yard like an old photograph. The hole we'd opened between rooms caught the last of the sunset, turning the dust motes to gold. Claire came to stand beside me. You okay? Yes, I said. And for once it wasn't a lie. We watched the sky darken, the stars pressing faintly through the dusk. You know, she said, I used to think we were supposed to move on. And now I think we're just supposed to move with it. I smiled. That's something your generation gets right. She laughed softly. We learn from you. Not enough, I said gently, but we try. The house was quiet around us, breathing evenly. For the first time, I realized I wasn't listening to his footsteps. I was hearing our own. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went back downstairs, drawn by something I couldn't name. The box still sat on the table. I opened it again, tracing the letters, the ribbon. In the bottom corner, I found one last note, half folded, written on a scrap of paper torn from a grocery list. It said simply, "Mom let go of the wall." I laughed, quiet, shaking. We already did, sweetheart. And for the first time since he left, I felt him not as an ache, but as air, the kind that moves freely through rooms you've finally learned to share. It had been almost a year since Michael's passing, and for the first time the house didn't sound hollow. The silence had texture now, soft, steady kind. Claire had stayed through every season, through the rain that warped the back porch boards, through summer evenings that smelled of cut grass and memory, through the first frost that painted our windows silver. We had built our rhythm. Coffee at 7, gardening on Sundays, blueberry pie every month, not because we liked it, but because he did. But as spring crept in again, I could feel the shift, that quiet ache of something nearing completion. That morning, Claire came down early, blueprint in hand. Her hair was pulled up, her face lit with a rare brightness. "We're almost done," she said. "The last project." I smiled. The reading nook. She spread the blueprint across the counter, smoothing it out with her palms. "He wanted it here, see?" Her finger traced the small square beside the window. "A place for you." I looked where she pointed. Sunlight was spilling through the glass, turning dust motes into stars. "Yes," I whispered, "right there." By mid-morning, the living room was full of wood planks, nails, and the smell of sawdust. We'd called in a local carpenter, a gentle man named Luis, to help us make the frame. As he worked, Claire painted the walls. I sanded the boards, my hands learning again the patience of slow creation. "Have you ever built something like this before?" Luis asked. I shook my head. "Only people." He chuckled. "Harder job." "Yes," I said softly, "and worth it." When the seat took shape, I brushed my fingers along the edge. Smooth, solid. I thought of Michael's hands, always moving, always fixing, always dreaming. He would have loved this part. "Try sitting," Claire said. I lowered myself onto the bench. It gave slightly creaking in a way that felt honest. Claire sat beside me. "It fits," she said. "It does." The light through the window painted us gold. "I used to think finishing this would hurt," I said. "That it would mean he's really gone." Claire nodded. "I thought that too." "But it doesn't," I said. "It feels like a beginning." She smiled. "Maybe that's what he wanted." That evening, after Luis left, we cleaned up together, sweeping sawdust, folding the drop cloths, washing brushes. The air smelled faintly of pine and paint. When we were done, I brewed 2 cups of tea. We sat in the nook again, side by side. Outside, the maple swayed gently, its leaves whispering like a familiar voice. I was thinking, Claire said, her voice careful, about moving. My hands froze around the cup. "Oh, not far," she added quickly. "Just closer to work. There's a small apartment near campus. It feels like time." I nodded through my heart twisted. "You don't have to explain." "I know," she said, "but I want to." She looked out the window, eyes following the fading light. "When he died, I didn't know where I belonged. Here everything hurts. But now, I think it healed me. And maybe it's time to see if I can stand on my own again." I swallowed. "You can. You always could." She smiled. "Not without you." I reached over and took her hand. "Then wherever you go, take me with you." "You already do." We sat in silence for a long while, hands clasped, tea cooling the house, humming around us, alive, forgiving. Later, when she went upstairs to pack a few things, I stayed behind. The nook gleamed under the lamplight, fresh wood glowing like honey. I leaned back and exhaled. He had wanted this for me, a place to sit still, to let light find me instead of always chasing it. And now here it was, finished, real, ours. For the first time, I whispered aloud into the quiet, "We did it, son." And I swear I felt the air move, not as wind, not as ghosts, but as warmth, like the house itself was exhaling too. The morning she left, the sky was clear, one of those bright, impossible blues that make even goodbye look merciful. Her car was packed neatly, boxes labeled books and kitchen stacked in the back, a single suitcase in the passenger seat. We stood in the driveway, neither of us quite ready. "You have the spare key?" I asked. She nodded. "It's on my chain. You know, just in case I miss the creaky stairs." I smiled. "They'll miss you too." We hugged long, quiet, no words left to fix what time already had. When she finally pulled away, she looked at me, eyes bright, smile trembling. "He'd be proud, you know." "Of what?" "Of us," she said. I nodded, unable to speak. As she drove off, gravel crunching under the tires, I raised my hand. She waved back, and then the curve of the road took her. The house was silent again, but not empty. I walked back inside, the smell of lavender drifting through the open window. Sunlight pooled across the floor, reaching all the way to the reading nook. I sat down, letting the light rest on my face. From here, I could see everything: the open wall, the kitchen, the garden beyond, every corner we had rebuilt, every room we had forgiven. The blueprint hung above the bench, now framed faded, full of his handwriting. Beneath it, I had added my own note: built with love, finished with grace. I smiled. We did good, Michael, I whispered. Better than we knew how. The maple rustled outside, a soft applause. Weeks passed. Life rearranged itself quietly, the way it does when you stop trying to control its shape. I joined a local garden club, started hosting Sunday lunches. Neighbors came, laughed, filled the rooms with noise that didn't ache anymore. Sometimes Claire called, sometimes she came by, dropping off flowers or a new recipe. Her laugh echoed easily through the open wall now. One evening, she brought someone new, a man named Daniel, kind eyes, gentle smile. He shook my hand firmly. It's good to finally meet you, Mrs. Garvey. Margaret, I corrected. If you're sitting at my table, you've earned the first name. Claire laughed. Told you. Dinner was simple roast chicken bread, still warm pie for dessert, the kind of meal that knows how to hold a conversation. At one point, I caught Claire glancing toward the nook. She smiled small and secret. Later, she told me she still felt him here, not haunting, just present. I did too, but softer now, like light through a wall. That night, after they left, I stood by the window, watching the sky fade to indigo. The lavender swayed gently, fragrant and alive. On the table lay the box of letters, worn, familiar, beloved. I opened it one last time. There were only 2 envelopes left, mine and Claire's, both reread until the creases had softened. I set hers aside and unfolded mine. The ink was faint now, but the words still clear. You're both right. You just need time. He was right as always. I smiled through tears. We had time, sweetheart, and we used it well. Before bed, I lit a single candle in the kitchen window, a habit from my childhood, a way of saying someone's still here. The flame flickered small and steady. The open wall carried its glow through the rooms, casting warm light on everything we'd built. And as I turned to leave, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass, older, yes. Softer, too, the kind of face that's lived long enough to know love never leaves. It just changes address. Epilogue. Home 2.0. A year later, I hosted a small gathering for Michael's birthday. Claire came early, bringing Daniel and a bouquet of lavender. The house was full again, laughter, clinking dishes, stories that grew taller with each retelling. When it quieted, I raised a glass. To the man who made us builders, I said, and to the house that kept us honest. Claire's eyes met mine, shining. To my family, she said. We clinked glasses. Later, as the guests left and the light dimmed, I sat in the nook one last time that night. The candle on the counter flickered. The house breathed. I thought of the wall we'd torn down, the letters we'd read, the wounds that had become windows, and I whispered, You did it, Michael. You made us a home. Outside, the maple leaves brushed the glass like fingers tapping to say goodnight, and for the first time I didn't cry, because love when tended becomes light, and light once shared never really leaves.